Hello everyone, my name is Slips and welcome to your first Spigot / Bukkit plugin development tutorial. I'm going to go very slow on this. We're going to go over everything. We're going to go over importing all of the really easy stuff, and this is just going to be a really simplified, easy plugin tutorial, nothing complicated. If you're having any problems or anything that you can't get around, just leave a message in the comments. I'm not going to go through any of the installing Eclipse and all that sort of thing, because in all honesty you should know how to install software. So let's get started. So we're using Java Eclipse. The link for the download will be in the description. First thing we want to do is, once you've opened your Java compiler, is you're going to right click over here on your package explorer, or you can go up to new in the top corner. We're just going to go, file in the top corner. We're just going to go new Java project. Now we're going to call this project explosive arrows. Sorry, I did forget to mention that we will be creating a explosive arrows plugin, so when a entity or when an arrow is fired, it will explode on contact. Don't worry, it's much easier than it sounds. So we're just going to hit finish, and that will create this project here. Now just excuse me, because this is my second attempt. We're just going to delete what is already here. So we have a fresh, there we go, we've now got a fresh packet, back to how it was, package. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our package, and to ensure that we're using the Bukkit / Spigot server API, we need to import the server software. So we're going to go to build path, add external archives. Now what you want to do is you want to create a folder, something called build path, or something where you want to put your server jar in. So a server jar is in the file that you download called craftbucket.jar or spigot.jar. I've created a folder here in my Eclipse folder called Bukkit, and I've added my Spigot server jar in here, and I'm just going to click that and add that to our build path. We're going to go, next what we're going to do is we're going to go to our source folder, and we're going to go new package. Now a package is basically just a group of folders, really, where you're going to put all of your class files, like your main class file and all that sort of thing. But really it's just to avoid conflict with any other plugins that may have the same class file names. So you want it to be something unique. So for mine, I do my website name. So com.mcplugindev .explosive arrows. So if we go back and look at this, you can see here com.mcplugindev, that's my website name, so that's unique to me, and then the name of the plugin, so explosive arrows. And we're going to go finish. Now you'll see under source over here you've created this new package. So in here we want to create our class file, or our main class, where we're going to do everything. So we're going to go right click and go new class. Now you don't need to worry about anything in here other than this name, what you're going to call the class. So we'll call it explosive arrows, and we will click finish. Now we've generated this new class file, and here is where we can write the code for it. But to make sure that this class file uses the is going to be a main class for the Bukkit or Spigot API, we need to extend the plugin class that Bukkit gives you. So we're going to write extends Java plugin, and all that does is that means now, well, this class is going to be a Bukkit plugin. We can now use this class to get Bukkit plugin events from the server. So what we can do is we can hover over Java plugin, because that's come up with an error, because we need to actually import this from our spigot.jar here that we imported earlier. So what we can do is we can mouse over and just click import, and that will import Java plugin from our spigot.jar or our bukkit.jar that we added earlier. Okay, so the next thing we want is we want a method. Now Bukkit has two methods in which will automatically be run by the server when it loads up. So we've got public void on enable. Here we go. Let's go over this. So this method here basically means when the server starts, or when this plugin is enabled, we want to run this code in between these lines here, so we can add a couple more lines. So it's going to run everything contained inside these two curly brackets here. So public means that all classes can access it, and void means it's not returning anything. You don't need to worry about either of those for now because this will all be, you'll use these later, they won't affect anything. So for our first test we want to actually just say to the console that the plugin has been enabled. So we're going to this, we're going to get this class and we're just going to get logger, so that's our server console. This .get logger .info. So we're just going to print a message to the console. Now all it requires is a string, so just words basically, and we can define that with two open close or two double quotes, and so we just write in has been enabled. Sorry for that. So it's going to say that this plugin has been enabled. Now we can do the same for when the server turns off. So public void on disable, open close, and then we want our curly brackets. We're going to do the same thing. This, we're going to get our logger from the server, and we're going to log has been disabled. That's going to come up on your server console. So in other words, this when the server starts up or shuts down, or when the plugin is reloaded. And we're just going to save. So now we can export this. So export's going to compile everything in here into a jar file. So just a jar that you can drop in your plugins folder. So we're going to select jar file. I'm going to select our location. And so I've got my dev server and my documents, plugins folder, and explosive arrows. I've already created one earlier because this is my second attempt at this. And we're going to save over it. So finish. We'll overwrite it, yes. Now if we go to our console, we can reload. Oh, and we get an error. Now this is because we are missing a plugin.yml file. So basically we need to give the server some information about our plugin. So if we go back here, we're going to have to create. So we go to our package, new, file. I'm going to create a plugin.yml. Now all this is a configuration file, just like any other config.yml or anything like that. But we're just going to give, basically Bukkit, we're just going to give them some information about our plugin, so like the name of the plugin. So we're calling it explosive arrows. What version of the plugin is it? Well, we're using version, this is our first version, so we'll call it version 1.0, or you can call it 1.0.0b, or you know, anything like that. And the last thing that Bukkit needs to actually run our plugin is the where our main class is. So we write main, and you can see over here that our class is in the package com.mcplugindev.explosivearrows. So we want to write in our package name mcplugindev.explosivearrows, and we're going to put another dot. We want to put our class name, which is explosive arrows. There we go. And So all we're saying is our main file is located at our package name dot our main class name, and we'll hit save. We'll refresh that, and now we can export our jar again. Explosive arrows.jar. Do we want to overwrite it? Yes. Now if we go back to our server and we reload, here we go. Explosive arrows has been enabled. Sweet. So now what we can do is we now need to work on, that's the first bit of our plugin done, everything's loading and fine. We now need to listen for an event. So if I said to you, I am creating a plugin that when an arrow hits something, it creates an explosion there. So what do we need? Well, we need to listen in to basically create the explosion. We need to listen for when an arrow hits something. So for that we need a listener. So we can turn our main class into a listener by writing up in the top implements listener, and we can import listener. Sweet, now our main class now implements listener, so it's now a listener. So what are we listening for? Well, public void on arrow hit, and then we want to write in what are we listening for. So we're listening for a projectile hit event, and we need a variable so that we can get all the information about that event. So we're going to write event as our variable, and open and close curly brackets, and we're going to import projectile hit event. So now what we have is we have this method here. So when a projectile hits something, we're going to run all of the code inside these two brackets that we're going to create. Just like when the server loads, we're going to write that code to the console. Well, when an arrow hits something, or when a projectile hits something, we're going to run this code in here. Now, public void, once again, doesn't matter, you can learn about that later. On arrow hit, now this can be completely random, because this is just defining this method. That's all it is. It can be on arrow touch, or on arrow connect, or anything like that. It just could be anything. What is important is the event type here. Now the only thing left to do is we have to load this event into Bukkit so it can recognize it. So we're going to do and at event handler, and we're going to import that, and that just sits at the top of your method, and basically it says, hey Bukkit, this is an event, we want you to read this as an event. And the last thing we need to do is actually register this event. We go back to our onEnable method, and we're going to say, well, when the server enables this plugin, we're going to register this event. So we do this dot get server, so we're going to get the server to register the event, get plugin manager. I'm sorry if this is a little bit confusing. And we're going to register events. Now it's going to ask you for two arguments, the listener and your main plugin. So our listener is this class, so we can just put this. And our main plugin is also this class, so we can just put this as well. So now we've got everything we need. All we need to do now is write the code to go in these brackets, and it should work absolutely fine. So if we go to, there are three things that we want to know. We want to get the projectile from the event, so we do projectile, that's the type, and then projectile, which is our variable name, equals event.get get entity, sorry. So, and we'll import projectile and add a couple lines. So we now have a variable called projectile, and we know it's a projectile. That's the type we've defined for it. Now the other thing we need is we need to know the world in which the projectile hit. So we need the world so we can create the explosion. So we're going to do world, which is the type, world, which is also the name, the variable name. And we're going to do projectile dot get world. We'll import world. And the last thing we need is the location of the projectile. Well, actually there's one more thing we need, but we'll add that soon. We can do location, lock. The location is the type. Lock is the variable name equals projectile dot get location. So now what we have is we have the projectile, we have the world, and we have the location. So all we have to do now is type in world, referring back to that world variable there, and we're going to create explosion. Now we need a location where to create the explosion, so we're going to type in lock, and how big the explosion is going to be, so we'll put 10F. All that is how big is it? Well, it's going to be 10. So you could just put 10 in there. That's easier. The size is 10. Now we will export that, just like before. And yep. And we'll click yes. We want to reload our server again. And we'll switch over to our Minecraft client and see if this works. So here we are. We're going to test this plugin out on some poor piggies. So if we aim and we create an explosion. Now the only problem that we have now, we actually have a couple problems, is because we're listening for any projectile hit, we can use snowballs. So we need to figure out whether the plugin is using an arrow or a snowball and only create the explosion if it's an arrow hit, or a snowball. Depends if you want explosive snowballs, but that seems like a little bit too OP if you ask me. So we're going to switch back over to our compiler. So now what we need is we need to check the entity type. So we can create a new variable, we'll call it entity type equals projectile dot get entity ID. Actually, it's an int, sorry, that's my bad. Int type equals projectile dot get entity ID. So now what we want to do is we want to create an if statement to compare that type. So we can do if type equals. Now there are two different equals. There's this one here, and what that does is that sets this to that. And then there's this one here which compares them, sees if they're the same. So we want to see if type equals entity type dot arrow. I think that should work. Or have I done something wrong? Yes, I have. Sorry, my bad. Let's go back here. Entity type, I was right the first time, equals projectile dot get type. There we go. Sorry, I was wrong the first time. I'm sorry if I confused anyone. So entity type equals projectile dot get type. So that's the type, and we're calling it type, just to confuse you even more. So if type is, so that's basically is, the double means is, an arrow. If it is, we want to put the curly brackets, and once again, if it is an arrow, we want to run the code in between these two brackets. So the code we want to put in there is just the explosion, so we'll cut that out and we'll paste that back in. So now we can export and click finish. Yes. And if we reload our console, switch back to our game, you can now see we don't have explosive snowballs, which is good. We still have explosive arrows though. That's a lot of fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. The next thing that we're going to be doing is in the next tutorial we'll be ensuring that only players can shoot explosive arrows. You will see that if I spawned in a skeleton, and he decides to shoot me, but he obviously doesn't, this one will. If he decides to shoot me, he also creates the explosion. So next tutorial we'll be going over how to make it so that only players can generate explosive arrows, and then we can move on to a toggling command in the next one, and then somewhere down the track we can even implement permissions using Vault. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Next one will be up very, very soon, and enjoy your explosive arrows.